What happens when a billionaire CEO walks into her own bank and is treated like a stranger? Naomi Sinclair built her empire from the ground up, a powerhouse in the world of finance, a black woman in a space that rarely made room for her. But on a seemingly ordinary afternoon, one simple transaction revealed something far uglier than numbers or market trends. It exposed a deeply entrenched bias in the very system she helped shape. And what Naomi did next? It didn't just rattle a few cages. It sent shockwaves through the entire financial industry. This isn't just a story about money. It's about power, about the insidious ways respect is earned, revoked, or withheld, and about one woman's quiet, devastating stand against injustice, hidden behind polished glass and marble counters. The morning sun beamed through the sky-high windows of Sentinel Holdings' Manhattan headquarters, painting golden streaks across the mahogany conference table where Naomi Sinclair sat sharp as ever. Every inch of her presence radiated command, straight-backed, eyes keen, hands rhythmically tapping the wood in thought. But her mind was already past this room, past this moment. She was scanning the field 3 moves ahead. The room buzzed with voices, directors in designer suits, some young and eager, others graying and cautious, seasoned with Wall Street cynicism. A few gave her genuine respect, most merely tolerated her, and some, she knew, were silently waiting for her to falter. "We need to consider the risks," said William Hargrove, a short, stocky man whose cufflinks screamed legacy wealth. "The economic landscape down south is unpredictable." Naomi didn't flinch, but inside she recoiled. She'd heard that word before. Unpredictable. It was code. It meant black neighborhoods, Latino families. It meant not like us. And risk. That was their go-to excuse for locking out communities that didn't fit their outdated picture of affluence. Once she was a junior analyst, fighting to get her voice heard in rooms like this. Now, as CEO, she still faced the same battles, only dressed in sleeker language. "I appreciate your concern, Bill," she said evenly. "But risk should be defined by data, not by assumptions. Sentinel Holdings is built on the principle of financial inclusion. We don't close doors on communities, we open them." A few nods, measured silence, but Hargrove wasn't finished. "Sustainability, Naomi," he pushed. "If we overextend into unstable repayment zones, it could compromise returns. It could hurt our standing with investors." "But you said, yes, and there's more." Naomi's jaw clenched. "Or," she countered, voice like steel, "we might be forced to admit that our policies contribute to the very instability you're warning about." The air thickened. No one spoke. Some directors avoided her gaze, others squirmed in their leather chairs. Naomi forced herself to exhale and relax her shoulders. She didn't want to escalate, but this was a battle she couldn't afford to lose. Her eyes flicked toward the projection at the front of the room. A map of the United States, lit up with dots marking key regions. One dot, a glowing red, marked Atlanta. Her home. The city where she learned to survive on grit and instinct, where dreams were deferred by credit scores and denied loans, where her own story had begun. "Enough euphemisms," she said, voice firm. "We need real visibility, on the ground. That's why I'm going to Atlanta. Myself." The room murmured in surprise. Mark Ellison, one of the younger directors, blinked. "You mean, without notice?" "Exactly. No meetings, no VIP treatment. I want to see how our branches operate when they think no one's watching." Hargrove cleared his throat. "Naomi, is that really necessary? We have executives down there who—" "That's precisely why I'm going." Her gaze held him, unwavering. "I need to see it with my own eyes." No one argued, not openly. But Naomi knew how power worked. The silence wasn't agreement. It was calculation. Some would find backdoor ways to undermine her. Others would bide their time. She stood, smoothing the lapels of her navy blazer. If there's nothing else, we're done here. As the boardroom emptied, Naomi lingered. Her eyes rested on the map, on Atlanta. She had broken barrier after barrier, but here she was, still explaining why fairness mattered. And for a moment, the question crept in, with all this power, am I really changing anything? She didn't let the doubt settle. She picked up her phone and called her assistant. Book me on the next flight to Atlanta. I leave tonight. The heat in Atlanta wrapped around her like memory. Naomi stepped out of the car, the afternoon sun casting a golden shimmer across Midtown. Familiar streets pulled her backward in time, to scraped knees, dollar stores, and borrowed hope. She wore no designer armor today, a simple gray dress, no jewelry, no entourage, just another customer. Prestige Bank's facade gleamed with money, glass, and chrome, cold and impenetrable. She inhaled slowly, then walked in. Inside, the contrast was immediate: cool air, polished marble, the sterile luxury of wealth management. White clients drifted between counters, greeted with smooth pleasantries. The room smelled like expensive leather and printer paper. Naomi joined the line. No one noticed her. And that was the point. When her turn came, she approached the teller, a young man with sandy blonde hair and a stiff, rehearsed smile. "How can I help you today?" he asked, though the politeness didn't quite reach his eyes when they met hers. "I'd like to withdraw $25,000, 0 cents, from my personal account." She handed him her bank card. He hesitated. "That's quite a large sum," he said, as if reading from a script he didn't believe. "Do you have ID?" She handed over her driver's license. Everything valid, everything pristine. But instead of processing the request, he studied her ID far too long. His lips thinned. "I'm going to need a secondary form of identification." Naomi blinked. "Excuse me?" "For security purposes," he said quickly. "It's standard for large withdrawals." She didn't flinch. "Standard?" Her voice was calm, but laced with warning. "Because the man before me withdrew twice that amount without this standard protocol." The teller stiffened. "We take fraud prevention seriously." Without waiting for her response, he turned and walked off, taking her ID and card with him. Naomi stood, heart steady but burning. "So this is what it looks like." She let her eyes roam. And what she saw made her stomach knot. A black man was being grilled at another counter. A white woman next to him smiled as her transaction wrapped up in under a minute. A middle-aged black woman was waiting, arms crossed, frustration etched deep, as her check was being verified. Across the lobby, a woman Naomi didn't know was raising her voice at a manager. "You telling me I have to wait 3 days for a check? I've banked here for years." Naomi didn't know her, but she knew that look, that exhausted resolve. Ryan returned, flustered. "I've escalated your request to the branch manager. He'll need to approve it before we proceed." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Of course." She walked to the seating area, unbothered, sat down, folded her arms. Her voice was quiet but firm. "I'll wait." Because sometimes power means staying silent in the face of injustice, not to accept it, but to expose it. And Naomi had all the time in the world. Naomi sat in the bank's waiting area, her hands lightly folded on her lap, her expression carved from stone. Around her, everything was engineered to make people feel small, from the towering ceilings to the sterile, overexposed lighting that stripped color from the world. Even the tellers, with their practiced disinterest, seemed to look through customers rather than at them. Every element of the environment whispered the same unspoken rule. Some people belonged here, and others, people like Naomi, did not. She remained invisible to most, Her presence hardly registered, except for the occasional stolen glance from Ryan Caldwell, who now stood assisting another customer. He hadn't returned with the supposed approval for her transaction. She didn't chase him. She wasn't about to chase anyone. She was going to sit right there, unmoving, unbothered, and undeniably present. Her gaze drifted toward another customer. A middle-aged white man in golf attire strolled up to a teller, card in hand. "I need to withdraw 50,000. 0 cents, he said casually. "Of course, sir," the teller responded with an eager smile, barely glancing at the ID. 2 minutes later, he walked out with crisp stacks of cash, untouched by scrutiny, untouched by suspicion. Naomi inhaled slowly, counting her breath, grounding herself in composure. A few feet away, a young black man at another counter was requesting just $5,000, 0 cents. The teller, a woman with a plastic customer service smile, leaned in and whispered, "I'm sorry, sir, but we'll need to verify the source of these funds. Could you provide proof of income?" His brows furrowed. "It's my account. Why do I need to prove anything?" "It's our security protocol," she replied quickly, her eyes darting to a nearby manager for backup. That phrase again. Security protocol. Naomi clenched her jaw. Her memory began filing every detail, every name tag, every phrase, every person. She wasn't just observing now. She was documenting. Then a voice broke through the murmurs, frustrated, firm, and fed up. "You've got to be kidding me. I've banked here for over a decade, and now you want to hold my withdrawal?" Naomi turned. Near the customer service desk stood a black woman in her mid-50s. Her arms were crossed tight against her chest, her salt and pepper curls haloing a face hardened by too many similar encounters. Her name tag read Lisa Thompson. "I'm just trying to take out $3,000. 0 cents. It's my money. What security concern could there possibly be?" she snapped. The manager, clean cut, no older than his early 30s, offered a weak response. "It's just policy." Lisa's response was a knife wrapped in velvet. Certain transactions or certain customers. That was enough. Naomi rose, her heels clicking against the marble as she approached the desk. "Excuse me," she said calmly. "Is there a reason this woman is being denied access to her own money?" But Lisa's eyes had already locked on Naomi's. Curious now, cautious but intrigued. "Mrs. Thompson, is it?" Naomi asked gently. Lisa nodded. "Yes." Naomi extended her hand. "I'm Naomi Sinclair." Lisa blinked, then shook her hand. "Nice to meet you, Miss Sinclair. Though I wish it were under better circumstances." "What's going on?" Naomi asked. "They're holding my withdrawal again," Lisa replied. "Been a customer here over 10 years. This ain't the first time they've made me jump through hoops." Naomi folded her arms. "And has anyone ever given you a real explanation?" Lisa gave a dry laugh. "Oh, sure. Fraud prevention, random checks, internal reviews, pick your poison." The manager tried to interrupt. "Ma'am, again, this is a private—" Naomi turned to him sharply. "I understand, but as a customer, I have every right to question inconsistency in service, and from what I've seen today, inconsistency is exactly what's happening." The manager's mouth closed. Lisa took the opening. "It's not just me," she said. "Friends of mine, working people, good credit, turned down for loans without reason. Always some excuse. They never seem to qualify for anything unless it's a fee." Naomi absorbed her words. This wasn't just mistreatment. It was a pattern. One carefully hidden behind the curtain of bureaucracy and policy. She reached into her purse and pulled out a slim notepad. Lisa raised an eyebrow. "Taking notes?" Naomi gave a faint smile. "I like to keep records." She began writing, tallying, race, gender, amount, response. The paper filled quickly with proof. Black and Latino clients treated like threats while their white counterparts were treated like royalty. She glanced back at Ryan, who was now awkwardly watching her from across the room. This was her company. Her name was on the letterhead, her vision in the mission statement, and still. This. Enough. Naomi stepped away and took out her phone. Her voice was low but unyielding when the line connected. I need a full report on the Midtown branch of Prestige Bank. Withdrawal and loan approvals, 6 months. Break it down by race, gender, income. Send it within the hour. When she hung up, she felt something settle in her chest. Not anger, but resolve. This was far from over. The office door opened. A tall man with perfectly styled salt and pepper hair stepped out. Jordan Pierce. She recognized him immediately from the Sentinel regional reports. Efficiency. Discretion. Corporate speak, for he knows how to cover tracks. He held a folder and wore a smile that had closed deals and quieted complaints. But Naomi didn't flinch. "Miss Sinclair," he greeted. "I understand there's a concern." She didn't stand, didn't shift, just met his gaze. "Concern is putting it mildly. Your teller has delayed my transaction for over 30 minutes, with all valid documentation provided. Why?" Jordan smiled like a man trying to walk through fire without sweating. "It's simply protocol for high-value withdrawals." "And that protocol," Naomi said coolly, "applies to everyone?" "Of course," he answered, "too fast." Naomi leaned forward. "Because I just watched a man take out twice the amount I requested. No ID check, no manager, just cash." Jordan's jaw tensed. "Our tellers are trained to identify potential risk," he said. Naomi tilted her head. "And what exactly about me was the risk?" He hesitated. That was all she needed. "It's not personal," he said. "Then name one factor used to flag my transaction," she challenged. Silence. Finally he spoke. "Miss Sinclair, I can personally authorize your withdrawal." Naomi stood. "No need. I'll continue my business as any other client would, without interrogation." She took a step, then paused. "Oh, and I assume this branch has security cameras?" Jordan blinked. "Of course." "Good," she replied, voice even. "Then you won't mind when I request the footage." The message hung in the air like a silent verdict. No further words were needed. Because the cameras hadn't just captured her frustration. They had captured the truth. Naomi's voice was steady as she made her final request. "I'd like a review of today's security footage to see exactly how these protocols have been applied across all customers." Jordan's hand tightened ever so slightly on the folder he carried before he quickly unclenched it. "I'm not sure that would be possible without a formal request through corporate." Naomi offered a small, knowing smile. "Lucky for me, I know exactly how to navigate those channels." She turned and walked back toward the waiting area, her posture fluid, composed, yet beneath the surface she was all steel and wildfire. The whispers started again behind her. Ryan and another teller leaned into each other like middle schoolers caught gossiping, but Naomi paid them no mind. She wasn't done, not by a long shot. Sliding her phone from her bag, she typed an encrypted message to her most trusted internal team. "Initiate an immediate audit on Prestige Bank, Midtown branch. I want 6 months of withdrawal and loan approval data. Flag every transaction requiring additional ID checks. Sort it by race, gender, and income bracket. Full discretion required." She pressed send. Then she waited. In her seat, Naomi's body was still, but her mind remained in motion, recording, analyzing. Every hesitant keystroke from the tellers, every nervous glance between staff, it all painted a picture clearer than any policy document ever could. This wasn't about a broken rule. It was about a system working exactly as designed. For some, at the expense of others. The pattern was unmistakable. White customers sailed through with ease. Black and Latino customers were met with roadblocks, delays, demands for verification, always with the same rehearsed words, security protocol. And the back door opened. A new face emerged, young, sharp-featured, with dark hair neatly parted and anxious eyes that scanned the room with cautious calculation. His name tag read, David Ramos. Naomi's gaze narrowed slightly. Unlike Ryan Caldwell, who moved with the unchecked confidence of someone who had never been challenged, David's posture was unsure, like he was constantly questioning whether he belonged. He took his place behind the teller counter, adjusting his tie like armor. As Lisa Thompson stepped forward again, Naomi's eyes stayed on them. Lisa handed over her bank card. "I need to withdraw $3,000, 0 cents, she said. Her voice balanced between firmness and fatigue. David paused, fingers hovering. He glanced up at her. "May I see your ID, ma'am?" His tone was cautious, but not cold. Lisa passed it to him. David typed into his system, then hesitated, but not out of suspicion. Naomi could tell it was something else. A reluctance, a quiet integrity. Then David looked up. "Everything looks good, Mrs. Thompson. Would you like that in 20s or 50s? Lisa blinked. 50s, please." Naomi watched her collect the money in stunned silence. For the first time that day, someone had simply done their job, without ego, without obstruction. "That's the first time I've gotten my own money here without a hassle," Lisa muttered, almost to herself. Much like Naomi heard it, and it only deepened her suspicion. Was David just an anomaly, or was he breaking unspoken rules that others strictly followed? As Lisa walked away, Naomi approached David. "Excuse me," she said softly. He looked up, recognition flickering in his eyes. Or was it fear? "Yes, ma'am," he said cautiously. Naomi leaned in, her voice low. "You handled that transaction very differently than your colleague. Why?" David's hand gripped the edge of the counter. I'm not sure what you mean." "You didn't delay her, you didn't ask unnecessary questions, you followed policy, payroll policy, not invented hurdles." He swallowed hard and glanced toward the manager's office. Jordan Pierce had reappeared, eyes on them. Before Naomi could press further, Jordan was already striding over, his polished shoes clacking like a warning bell. "Miss Sinclair," he said smoothly, "I believe we've addressed your concerns." Naomi turned to face him fully. "Have we? Because I still haven't received an answer about the inconsistencies I've witnessed today." Jordan's smile was tight, rehearsed. "Questioning our staff about internal procedures can be interpreted as interference." Naomi let out a quiet chuckle. "If you're worried about interference, maybe there's something that needs questioning." David stood behind the counter, frozen, absorbing it all, learning. Jordan's facade was beginning to crack. "Miss Sinclair," he said, jaw tightening, "unless you intend to file a formal complaint, I suggest we end this discussion." Naomi reached into her bag and withdrew her card. "Actually, I'd like to try my withdrawal again." Jordan's eyes narrowed. "You already attempted that transaction." She smiled faintly. "I'd like to see if the result changes." He hesitated. Caught. Denying her again would be too obvious. But letting her go through, especially under scrutiny, would expose everything. Ryan Caldwell reluctantly returned to the counter. "Are you serious?" he muttered. Naomi simply smiled. "Completely." As he took her ID again, Naomi subtly tapped the hidden record button on a discreet camera nestled in her bag, angling it just so. Ryan squinted at her documents. His fingers danced over the keyboard, each stroke heavier than the last. I still need manager approval. Naomi tilted her head. For all customers, correct? He stiffened. It's standard. Right, she said softly. The tension in the air buzzed like static. Jordan stood silently beside them, calculating, watching, realizing, too late, that Naomi wasn't just a powerful client. She was a mirror to everything they tried to hide. Naomi straightened. Thank you for your time, she said. As she turned to leave, she paused at the doorway. Her voice rang out, cool and clear. I'll be back, and next time, we'll have a very different kind of conversation. Jordan's expression didn't flinch, but his silence said everything. Ryan folded his arms, muttering something under his breath. But David just stood there, eyes following Naomi with something close to respect, maybe even hope. Outside, Naomi opened her secure messaging app. Proceed with the internal audit. I want preliminary data by morning. She hit send, then looked up at the bank's gleaming facade. The reflection staring back at her wasn't just of a CEO, it was of a storm on the rise. That night, the city of Atlanta shimmered beneath her hotel window. The skyline sparkled, alive with movement and light. But inside her suite, Naomi stood still, the quiet humming in her ears like an aftershock. What she had found today wasn't just evidence of prejudice. It was the architecture of exclusion, invisible lines drawn into every process, every policy, quiet acts of sabotage masked as standard procedure. She turned away from the window and dialed a number she knew by heart. It rang twice. Naomi, said the voice on the other end, I assume you're calling because of what we found? She moved to the desk, took a seat. Tell me everything, Elliot. There was a pause, then the sound of a tired exhale. She could picture him pinching the bridge of his nose, his tell, when the data made him furious. The audit confirms what you suspected, Elliot said. Black and Latino customers at the Midtown branch were asked for additional ID at a rate 3 times higher than white clients. Naomi's jaw tensed. And that's just the start, Elliot continued. Tellers and managers denied withdrawals to black customers at 2.5 times the rate of white customers. Naomi closed her eyes for a moment, breathed in. What about loans? Elliot's voice turned bitter. A black applicant with a 710 credit score is still 40% more likely to be rejected than a white applicant with the exact same score. She didn't speak right away. The weight of it was too familiar. She had clawed her way into boardrooms to build a world where that kind of injustice couldn't touch her anymore. But it still touched people. No, Elliot said. It's the orchard. Systemic, Naomi repeated quietly, her eyes still fixed on the numbers in front of her. These patterns aren't coincidence. They're too consistent, too precise. And it's not just 1 or 2 employees making bad calls. This feels structured. Exactly, Elliot responded. This goes beyond individual bias. It's culture. It's practice. It's the air they breathe inside that branch. Naomi rubbed her temple. Who signed off on this? Someone has to be pulling the strings. That's the problem, Elliot said, his voice taut. There's no paper trail, no memo that says target minority clients. But the results? They speak louder than any memo ever could. This was taught, encouraged, or at the very least tolerated. Naomi's fingers tapped slowly on the desk, a quiet drum of calculation. Can we trace it back to Jordan Pierce? Elliot paused. Hard to say. He's smart. He doesn't leave fingerprints. But he's been in charge for 5 years, and the numbers started shifting 2 years ago. So either he started it, or he's just following orders. I need proof before I move, Naomi said, more to herself than to Elliot. I can't go to the board with hunches. If I'm going to tear this down, I need something that can't be ignored." "What's the plan?" Elliot asked. Naomi's voice sharpened. "I'm going back in tomorrow. You know they'll be watching you." She smiled. "I'm counting on it." There was a beat of silence. Then Elliot said, "I'll have a fresh report ready by morning. You want me to notify the board?" "Not yet," Naomi replied. "If we move too soon, we give them a chance to cover their tracks. I want to see it for myself. All of it." "Understood," he said. "Be careful." Naomi hung up and sat back, the Atlanta skyline glittering behind her. She'd once dreamed in the shadows of this city, learning the hard way that people like her had to work twice as hard for half the credit. But tonight, she didn't feel small. She felt inevitable. She had spent decades proving she belonged in the rooms that once shut her out. Now she was ready to prove that the rooms needed to change. The next morning, Naomi arrived at Prestige Bank just minutes after it opened. She stepped out of the car with quiet determination, each footstep a declaration. This wasn't reconnaissance anymore. This was strategy. Beside her, Lisa Thompson adjusted the strap of her purse. Her expression was firm, no longer worn down by indignity, but sharpened by righteous resolve. Today, she wasn't just a witness. She was a mirror. Across the street, two sleek, unmarked sedans sat idle. Inside were members of Sentinel Holdings' internal audit team, silent observers with sharp eyes and hidden cameras. They weren't here to interfere, just to document. Naomi stepped through the glass doors, the lobby buzzing with early day routine, tellers smiling, printers humming, cards swiping. But every detail pulsed louder today. The woman at the service desk looked up, startled but professional. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I assist?" "I need to speak with Jordan Pierce," Naomi said, voice calm but immovable. The woman nodded quickly, recognizing the authority in Naomi's tone. "One moment, please." Lisa crossed her arms. "He's not going to like this." Naomi smirked. "I'm counting on that." Jordan emerged from his office moments later. He was composed, but his shoulders were tight with unease. He hadn't expected her back. Not like this. "Miss Sinclair," he greeted smoothly. "I didn't know you'd be returning so soon. How can I help you?" "You can start by explaining," Naomi said evenly, "why my withdrawal yesterday was flagged for excessive verification, while a white customer was allowed to take out double the amount without delay." Jordan's expression barely flickered. "As I mentioned, our procedures are designed to prevent fraud and—" Naomi cut in. "Let me stop you right there. I'm going to ask you again, and this time I want a real answer. Why was I singled out?" Jordan laced his fingers. "Miss Sinclair, I assure you it wasn't personal. We follow a risk-based model." "Does race factor into that model?" Naomi asked flatly. The muscle jumped in Jordan's jaw. "Of course not." "Then explain this." She pulled out her phone and opened a document. "This is a report from Sentinel Holdings Compliance Division, 6 months of transaction data, compiled and verified." Jordan didn't move, but Naomi saw his eyes flicker. She scrolled and read aloud. "Black customers are 3 times more likely to be subjected to identity verification than white customers. Cash withdrawals for Black and Latino clients are denied 2.5 times more often. And loan rejections, 40% more likely, even when credit scores are higher." Jordan opened his mouth. Naomi raised a hand. "Don't insult my intelligence," she said. Lisa stepped forward. "Yeah, I'd love to hear how you explain those numbers, because it doesn't look random to me." Jordan inhaled through his nose, posture unraveling. "We have policies." "Great," Naomi snapped. "Then show me. I'd like a copy of Prestige Bank's official ID verification policy." Jordan hesitated. "What's the problem?" Naomi asked. "You said it was standard. Surely that means it's written down." "Me? I'm afraid I can't share that with customers." Naomi smiled coldly. "That's unfortunate, because I already have it." She pulled out a printed document and handed it to him. "This is your policy, and you know what's interesting? Nowhere does it say withdrawals over $25,000, 0 cents require managerial approval. Nowhere does it mandate extra verification for certain clients." Jordan's fingers tightened around the paper. "So tell me," she said, "why was I flagged? Why was Lisa denied? Why does this keep happening to people who look like us?" Silence. Lisa crossed her arms. "Go ahead, we're listening." Jordan opened his mouth, but no words came. Naomi leaned in. "Cut the act. I already know the truth. I just want to see if you're capable of admitting it." His jaw worked silently. Naomi grabbed her bag. "You have until the end of the day, Jordan. Decide where you stand, with me or against me." And she walked out. But Naomi wasn't done. She returned to the bank that same morning, not to confront Jordan again, but to find the one person who might finally give her the truth. David Ramos. Unlike the others, he didn't strut or swagger. He looked over his shoulder more than he looked forward, like a man who knew things he wasn't allowed to say. When Naomi saw a gap between customers, she approached. "Mr. Ramos," she said gently. He looked up, startled. "How can I help you?" Naomi leaned in, her voice low. "I think you already know." He glanced at the security camera, then at Ryan, who was pretending not to listen. "Ma'am, if you need help." "I don't want to cause trouble," Naomi said. "I want the truth." David paused. His fingers trembled just slightly. Then, without a word, he scribbled something on a slip of paper and slid it to her. "Break room. 5 minutes." Naomi nodded and walked away. 5 minutes later, she slipped through the staff door into the break room. David was waiting, arms crossed. "You have 5 minutes," he said. Naomi closed the door behind her. "You know this is wrong, and I think you're the kind of person who can't keep ignoring it." David let out a long breath. "I don't want to lose my job, but I don't want to keep hurting people either." Naomi met his eyes, then talked to me. He glanced around, then said quietly, "There's a system here, it's not..." He hesitated, but Naomi already knew. It wasn't just a system of paperwork. It was a system of silence, of complicity, and the walls were starting to crack. "It's not official," David whispered. "Not on paper, but it exists." Naomi didn't speak. She gave him space to unburden what had clearly been buried under layers of fear. "Customers like you," David continued, his voice lower now, weighed with shame, "like Mrs. Thompson, you're flagged, quietly, automatically." "What about..." Naomi felt something sink in her stomach. David's eyes shifted toward the door before returning to hers. "Ryan, some of the others, they've been told, unofficially, to monitor transactions closely when the customer is Black or Latino. It's always dressed up as protocol, risk assessment, you know? But we all know what it really is." Naomi's voice was a quiet thread. "Told by who?" David exhaled, glancing around the break room like the walls had ears. "Upper management, not directly. It's all suggestions, implications. But you learn quick. If it's a white customer, they get trust. A Black customer, they get suspicion." Next quote. Naomi's fists curled at her sides. "And if someone doesn't follow these unspoken rules?" she asked. David looked away. "Bad performance reviews, missed promotions. They say you're not a cultural fit, and if you push back too much, you're out." Naomi folded her arms, her tone sharp. Ryan Caldwell. He doesn't just enforce it, he believes in it, doesn't he? David let out a hollow laugh. Ryan thinks certain people just don't belong in high-end banking. Management loves him for it. Do you have proof? David hesitated. Maybe. Old emails, memos, but if I try to get them, I'm exposed. Naomi stepped closer, her voice now urgent but controlled. You told me you didn't want to lose your job, but is this the kind of job worth keeping? There was silence. Then, with a heavy nod, David said, I'll find something. At that moment, Naomi's phone buzzed. She pulled it from her bag, expecting Elliot. Instead, her heart skipped. No sender, no subject, just one sentence. Be careful, some people don't want this truth to come out. Later that night, Naomi sat at the small desk in her hotel suite, the city lights of Atlanta glowing faintly through the window. She stared at her screen. Just 11 words, and yet they weighed more than any corporate threat she'd faced before. This wasn't just a warning, it was a surveillance-grade signal. She'd been warned in boardrooms before, gently redirected, cautioned, but this was different. This was a digital tap on the shoulder from someone watching in silence. She took a breath and called Elliot. He answered after 2 rings. Naomi, this isn't a social check-in, is it? No, I just received a message. Anonymous, no IP, no signature, just a warning. There was a long pause. Then Elliot cursed under his breath. She could hear paper shuffling. We might have a problem, he said. Someone's been running background checks on you through Prestige Bank's internal network, monitoring your transactions, cross-refreshing your personal history. It's coming from someone high up, regional executive level. Naomi's grip tightened on the phone. Do we know who? Not yet. But it's not just Jordan. He's not the mastermind. He's just one piece. Naomi closed her eyes, then opened them again with new clarity. Then, I need to talk to him. Tonight. Elliot sighed. Naomi, you need to be careful if they're threatening you. He calmed in. That means I'm getting close. A pause, then a wry chuckle. That stubbornness is going to get you killed someday. But not today. She hung up, grabbed her blazer, and walked out. This time, she wasn't entering as a customer. She was walking in as the CEO of Sentinel Holdings. And she was done asking politely. Jordan Pierce looked up from his desk just as Naomi pushed the door open. She didn't knock. She didn't smile. She shut it behind her with a calm, deliberate click. Miss Sinclair, he said, rising quickly. I wasn't expecting me, she asked, sitting without waiting for his invitation. Jordan blinked, then sat slowly, choosing his words with surgical care. How can I assist you? Naomi opened her bag and placed a thin folder on the desk. This report, she said, was compiled by Sentinel's Compliance Division. It documents every flagged transaction, every denied withdrawal, and every rejected loan from this branch over the last 6 months. Naomi leaned forward. Black and Latino customers are flagged at 3 times the rate of white customers. Withdrawals are disproportionately blocked. And loans? Biased approvals across the board. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation, he started. Naomi tapped the folder. Then give it to me. He paused. Miss Sinclair, I'm simply following corporate guidelines. She cut him off. Corporate guidelines don't justify discrimination. Jordan's smile thinned. Sentinel has many branches. Perhaps this is an isolated... Are you? She countered. For the first time, Jordan looked unsure. Who gave the directive, Jordan? I don't know what you mean. Don't insult me. This isn't unconscious bias. This is engineered. I need to know. Are you the architect? or just another brick in the wall? He looked away. Then, after a long, bitter silence, he let out a dark laugh. You really think I'm in charge? You think I decide who gets what loan? I'm not the machine. I'm the grease keeping it running. Naomi's voice was a knife now. Then who is? Jordan looked up, and for the first time, she saw real fear. If you keep pushing, he said, you're going to put yourself in danger. Naomi stood, straightened her blazer. Then consider this my warning back. She turned for the door. Miss Sinclair, Jordan said. She stopped. You're stepping into something much bigger than you realize. Naomi glanced back over her shoulder. Then I guess I need to step harder. The humid Atlanta air hit her as Naomi stepped outside. She didn't slow. Her thoughts raced. Jordan wasn't lying. He wasn't in charge. He was afraid. And that meant the rot ran deeper than she imagined. Her phone buzzed. Elliot's name lit the screen. I hope you've got good news, she said. Check your email, he replied. Naomi slipped into the driver's seat and opened the file. The subject line made her pulse quicken. Internal Communications, Sentinel Holdings Executive Board. The messages looked harmless at first. Dry emails, all about efficiency, stability, standard language. But then came the real story. In the subtext, heightened scrutiny for high-risk clientele, stronger safeguards against unverified sources, preserve institutional integrity. And then a name appeared. Richard Calloway, Senior Vice President, a man she had sat across from in countless meetings, cordial, measured, smiling. Her blood ran cold, because beneath that smile was the blueprint. Richard Calloway had always played the part of the mentor, the seasoned executive who offered quiet support in boardrooms, who praised Naomi's boldness when it was convenient, and who remained conspicuously silent when it mattered most. But now, as Naomi scrolled through the damning emails, the mask fell. He hadn't just known about the policies at Prestige Bank. He had crafted them. The language was clean, clinical, refining risk strategies, elevated verification in sensitive markets, phrases dressed in professionalism, hiding what they truly meant, racial profiling. He had built this under the guise of prudent business, and worse, he had convinced the board it was smart economics. Naomi's grip tightened on her phone. Her hands trembled, not with fear but fury. This wasn't about a single branch anymore. This was Sentinel Holdings. This was the foundation of the empire she had helped build. And now, that foundation was poison. She'd spent decades proving she could sit at the table, that a black woman could lead in the world of billion-dollar institutions. She had cracked ceilings, outperformed peers, shattered expectations. And still, beneath the glossy surface, the old machinery remained. The decision now stretched heavier than ever. If she went public, Sentinel Holdings would shake. Stock prices would nosedive. Lawsuits, headlines, scandal. The very company she'd poured her life into could crumble. Was she ready to tear it down? Naomi closed her eyes and saw Lisa Thompson's frustration, the quiet dignity in David Ramos' fear, the young black man who only wanted access to his own money. She opened her eyes with clarity. This wasn't about her legacy anymore. It was about justice. She dialed Elliot. I need every document, she said, every email, anything that links Calloway to these practices. We prove this wasn't accidental. We prove it was intentional. Elliot didn't hesitate. On it. She hung up. This wasn't just going to be an exposure. It was going to be a reckoning. The stack of documents before her was thick. Line after line of data, reports, summaries, each one more devastating than the last. Each page revealed how discrimination had been normalized, sanitized, and made routine. Naomi sat at her hotel desk in silence. She had fought to build an empire that meant something, a business that created opportunity. But what good was power if it protected broken systems? What good was a seat at the table if you stayed silent while others were turned away at the door? Her phone buzzed. "Naomi," Elliot said, his voice tight. "It's worse than we thought." "Yon, this isn't just prestige. It's multiple branches. The practices are tied to our most profitable divisions." "And Callaway?" "He wrote the playbook," Elliot said. "It started years ago, before you took over. But he's been steering the ship. And Naomi, if you go after him, you won't just be fighting a man. You'll be taking on the entire old guard." Naomi exhaled. "Then I'll need to speak to him." "You're sure?" "More than ever." The next morning, Naomi walked through the glass atrium of Sentinel Holdings' Manhattan headquarters. Her heels echoed on the marble. Every assistant, every executive she passed seemed to sense it, that something seismic was about to hit. She reached Callaway's office. He was waiting. Late 50s, silver hair, clean suit, still as calm, still as smug as the man who had once praised her promotions while quietly implementing the very policies she was now exposing. "Naomi," he said smoothly, "I had a feeling you'd be stopping by." She shut the door behind her, placed the heavy folder on his desk. "I assume you know why I'm here?" Callaway glanced at the folder, but didn't touch it. "Let me guess," he said. "You finally understand how this industry really works." Naomi didn't flinch. "You're good, Naomi," he continued. "Better than I thought. I always knew you had ambition, but I didn't expect you'd be the one trying to burn down the house." She folded her arms. "You built this system, Richard. You turned racial profiling into policy. You made inequality look like a business strategy. And you," he said, "benefited from it." "The uncle might..." Naomi's gaze sharpened. "Not knowingly, and not anymore." He chuckled softly. "You think you can fight this? You think one report, one woman, can undo decades of institutional momentum? This company will not run on policies that harm people," Naomi said. "Not while I'm in charge." Callaway leaned forward, eyes colder now. "You didn't build this system, Naomi. You inherited it, and if you try to dismantle it, you will be dismantled. The board will abandon you. Investors will paint you as a liability. Your wealth tied to our stock. If Sentinel falls, so do you." Naomi's heart pounded, but her voice stayed calm. "Then let it fall." She slid the folder toward him. "This is your chance to make it right." "And if I don't?" he asked, eyebrow raised. She straightened. "Then I take it public." Callaway gave her a long, unreadable look. "You'd burn down the empire you built?" She met his gaze. "If I don't, then I'm no better than you." He leaned back. "You always were a fighter." Naomi turned for the door. "If you do this," he said, voice low, "you will not win. You may expose it, but the system will crush you." She paused, one hand on the door. "Then I guess I'll need to step harder." And she walked out. The boardroom of Sentinel Holdings was cold and still as Naomi stood at the head of the polished oak table. Towering windows behind her bathed the room in light. A dozen board members stared back, some tense, some defiant, some unreadable. She placed both palms on the table. "I've called this emergency meeting because something can no longer be ignored," she said. "Wait." A screen behind her lit up with the first slide. Internal reports, color-coded data, and a truth that had remained buried for far too long. "We have a problem," she said. "A systemic one." She walked them through every data point, every discrepancy, every name, every number. "This isn't about one rogue branch. This is company-wide ball, and it was designed, quietly, intentionally, by those in power. Policies built on exclusion, masked as risk. The silence was suffocating. Then, crack. "Naomi, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Douglas Wren, a balding man in a pinstripe suit, slammed his palm against the table. "You're dragging Sentinel through the mud. Do you realize what this will do to our stock, to our reputation?" Naomi stood tall. "I'm not dragging anything," she said. "I'm revealing what was always there." Because the truth was never the threat. It was the refusal to face it. The room was in chaos. "What do you think this will do to our stock value, to our investors?" Douglas Wren barked, his face red with fury. Another voice joined him, Marjorie Ellison, one of the longest-standing board members. "If this information goes public, we'll face lawsuits, regulatory investigations. We'll lose everything. Our reputation won't survive this." Naomi met their eyes, calm and clear. "You worried about reputation?" she said. "I'm worried about what's right, about our customers, about our employees, about the soul of this company." "Spare us the moral high ground," Wren sneered. "Every major bank exercises discretion in risk assessment." "What you're calling discrimination? That's just business sense. We evaluate risk. We mitigate loss. That's our job." Naomi didn't blink. Instead, she held up a printed email. "This your idea of smart business, Douglas?" she asked. "Because this," she raised the page, "is an internal message explicitly advising branch managers to apply heightened scrutiny to specific demographic patterns. We all know what that means." Wren opened his mouth, but the room was suddenly filled with a slow, sarcastic clap. At the far end of the table, Richard Calloway, silent until now, leaned back in his chair, fingers laced together, his expression one of amused contempt. "Well, well," he drawled. "Naomi, I have to hand it to you. You don't back down." Naomi crossed her arms. "This isn't a game, Richard." "Isn't it?" he said, tilting his head. "You called this meeting to expose me, to parade your virtue. But what I see," he said, voice tightening, "is a CEO willing to gamble everything for a fight she's already lost." Naomi's jaw tightened. He continued, tone darkening. "Let's say you succeed. The media runs wild. Customers panic. Lawsuits flood in. The government steps in. Sentinel's stock crashes. And then what? Our competitors tear us apart. Wall Street doesn't honor martyrs, Naomi. It rewards control." Naomi let the silence fall, refusing to show fear. "Maybe the real question," she said. Richard's smirk faded. He stood slowly, pushing back from the table. "I motion for an immediate vote of no confidence in Naomi Sinclair as CEO of Sentinel Holdings." Voices erupted across the room. Wren raised his hand. "Seconded." "All in favor?" Richard asked. Naomi sat still, watching. Some hands shot up immediately. The usual suspects: Wren, Ellison, a few others. The old guard. But others didn't. Elijah Carter, who had grown up in poverty and built his own fortune brick by brick, kept his hands firmly on the table. Margaret Liu, a longtime diversity advocate, didn't move either. Then another, and another. Richard's expression faltered. The tide had turned. Naomi exhaled, inwardly. She still held the reins. "Well," Richard said, forcing a chuckle. "Seems the board isn't ready to let you go." Naomi stood. "No, they're not." "Which means you might want to start clearing out your office." His eyes hardened. But before he could reply, Naomi's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, then looked up. "Before we finalize anything," she said, "there's something you all need to hear." She tapped the screen. The boardroom speakers came alive. "I don't care what you have to do. Just make sure the loan denials don't look too obvious. Tighten the criteria. Flag certain customers. We have to protect our numbers. If that means some people get turned away, so be it. Silence. Another voice, nervous. But what if we're disproportionately denying? Richard's voice again, cold and clear. Do you want to keep your job? Then follow the protocol. We can't let these customers disrupt our risk balance. The recording ended. A heavy silence fell. Naomi turned to the screen behind her, pulling up an email chain. This is from Richard Calloway's office 6 months ago, she said, highlighting the header. Subtle language, coded terms, but the intent is obvious. Discrimination disguised as policy. Shifting chairs, uneasy glances. The truth was unmistakable now. This is a serious allegation, Wren said, voice suddenly tentative. But a single recording. Naomi spun toward him. It's not a single recording. It's dozens and hundreds of emails, all sent to legal and to a handful of journalists just in case. Richard slammed his palm on the table. You have no idea what you've done. Naomi's voice was ice. I know exactly what I've done. Then Margaret Liu's voice cut through the tension. Richard, explain why our rejection rates for Black and Latino applicants are significantly higher than those of our competitors, despite comparable credit scores. Richard stammered. Explain, Elijah Carter added, why all the flagged customers have one thing in common. He didn't answer. Naomi leaned forward. You built your career manipulating risk assessment to justify discrimination, and it ends now. Wren cleared his throat. We need to discuss further. Naomi shot him a look. Funny, you didn't want to delay the vote when it was about me. Margaret Liu turned to the others. We've seen enough. The final vote was called. One by one, hands rose. The balance shifted, slowly, then clearly. Richard had lost. The chairman finally spoke. Richard Calloway is hereby placed on indefinite leave pending a full investigation. Naomi had won. Richard sat frozen, jaw tight. Then, slowly, he stood and buttoned his suit jacket. You think this changes anything? He said. Naomi looked him in the eye. I know it does. He chuckled bitterly. Enjoy your moment, Naomi. It won't last. And with that he turned and walked out. Naomi stood by the massive windows of her corner office, staring out at the city below. Manhattan pulsed with movement, power, history. But today the air felt different. The headlines had already begun to spread. Sentinel Holdings faces reckoning after CEO exposes internal bias practices. December. She wasn't celebrating. She wasn't naive. The system wouldn't fall overnight. But today it cracked. And Naomi Sinclair was just getting started. The media storm hit like a tidal wave. Within hours of Naomi's presentation to the board, leaks exploded across every platform. News anchors scrambled to explain the implications while social media erupted in waves of outrage and solidarity. Hashtags trended, videos circulated. Minority customers began sharing their own stories, moments of quiet humiliation, delays, denials, the subtle sting of being treated as suspect when all they wanted was access to their own money. The numbers weren't statistics anymore. They had names, faces, voices. Some praised Naomi as a visionary. Others accused her of recklessness, claiming she was destabilizing one of America's most powerful financial institutions. Naomi didn't flinch. She had spent years learning how to survive in spaces that weren't built for her, how to play the long game in rooms filled with sharp suits and sharper tongues. But she wasn't on the outside anymore. She was running the game now. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Elliot stepped in, his usual guarded energy softened by something more rare. Pride. He handed her a folder. You've really done it, he said quietly. Naomi flipped through the pages, her plan unfolding piece by piece. Not yet, she said, but her voice carried the steadiness of someone who could already see the path forward. She spread the documents across the table. "First," she said, pointing, "Richard Calloway, gone. The board votes tomorrow to finalize his termination. A public statement goes out by week's end." Elliot grinned. "I'd pay good money to see his face when that happens." "Second, we're rewriting the playbook. All loan policies, account protocols, verification criteria, every single one gets reviewed, audited, independently. No more loopholes, no more silent bias. You're making it permanent. Have to, because if we don't root this out completely, it'll grow back." Elliot leaned forward. "You know you're making enemies." "Let them come," she said. Some financial giants had already begun murmuring, anonymous letters, critiques cloaked as concern. Naomi knew the code. She's being disruptive. She's overreaching. Translation: she's forcing us to change. Some of her own senior team were skittish. The markets were turbulent. Investor calls were laced with coded panic. But Naomi was resolute. "If our empire relied on a system that punished the vulnerable," she said, "then maybe it was never as strong as we thought." "So what's next?" Elcher asked. Naomi turned toward the window. The city glowed beneath her, imposing, magnificent. "Next," she said, "we make sure this doesn't stop with us." She turned back to him. "We launch a financial ethics committee, something real, not a PR stunt. Independent regulators, outside watchdogs. We force accountability across the sector." Elliot raised an eyebrow. "You're going after the entire industry now?" "They'll call me dangerous," Naomi said. "They'll say I've gone too far, but one way or another, they'll have to follow." He laughed softly. "Damn, Naomi, you really don't do anything halfway." She smiled faintly. "Not when it matters." But the backlash was brutal. Within 24 hours, Sentinel Holdings became the epicenter of a global reckoning. Headlines clashed. Some painted her as a revolutionary. Others claimed she was unraveling the fabric of financial trust. Investors panicked. Stocks swung violently. High-profile clients began quietly pulling assets. Some board members felt the pressure. Others began receiving reminders from Richard Calloway's allies, warnings disguised as advice. He might have lost the vote, but he wasn't gone. Naomi knew that. He was still playing the game behind closed doors, whispering about another vote, another removal, this time targeting her. The war was far from over. The next morning, headlines plastered every screen. The financial reckoning, Naomi Sinclair vs. Wall Street. Our play or self-destruction. Calloway ousted. A justified move or corporate suicide. In meetings, Naomi felt the chill. Once friendly colleagues kept their distance. At home, her phone never stopped buzzing. Calls from politicians, press, activists, investors. And then, just when the doubt began to creep in, a letter, handwritten, folded neatly, left on her desk. It was from Lisa Thompson. "For years, I thought we were invisible, that people like me had no power, but you proved otherwise. You stood up when no one else would, and now, people are listening. Whatever happens next, know this, you are changing lives. Thank you for not giving up." Naomi read it twice. Her eyes stung, her chest tightened. This was the reason. It had never just been about Sentinel Holdings. It was about everyone like Lisa, everyone who had ever been overlooked, doubted, denied. And if standing up for them meant taking every punch the system could throw, so be it. She wouldn't back down. 1 month later, Sentinel Holdings was no longer in free fall. The storm had passed, but not without damage. Legal challenges remained. Public scrutiny was intense. Rival banks lobbied against her reforms. A few prominent investors walked away, but something bigger had taken hold. Congress began drafting a Financial Equity Act, legislation aimed at eradicating discriminatory banking practices. It was happening. The industry was being forced to evolve. Because of Naomi, other banks, under pressure, began rewriting their own policies, not because they wanted to, but because they had to. The world was watching, and then came the call from the White House. The president's senior advisor personally invited Naomi to join a national committee for financial reform to help rewrite the rules. She had spent her life fighting for a seat at the table. Now she was redesigning the room. Power always came with a price. Some elite circles, private retreats, fundraising galas no longer invited her. She had shattered the illusion that the system could police itself. And for that, the old guard would never forgive her. She had become something more dangerous than powerful. She had become undeniable. Naomi Sinclair didn't just win a boardroom battle. She shook an entire industry. She thought not for profit, but for purpose. She exposed the lie that injustice had to be tolerated in the name of smart business. Her story reminds us that real change demands sacrifice, that truth comes at a cost, that systems don't crumble on their own. They're challenged. So the question is, who among us will rise when the stakes are high? Who will speak truth in rooms built on silence? Who will fight not just for their seat at the table, but for a better table, altogether? Naomi did. And the next fight? It's already here. Let's keep talking. If you believe in stories that spark change, that challenge power and rewrite the rules, subscribe. Because the revolution doesn't end in the boardroom.